Okay, I'm going to try to record these for you so that you can look at these later on. So in case you do miss some steps, or if you just want to review it again for some other reason later on, you can. Okay, we're going to start with creating a new virtual machine. So I'm going to File, New Virtual Machine. And I usually just use custom. There aren't actually anything that we'll be changing with this one. So we could get by with typical, but just out of practice for other installations, I typically use custom. And I click next on there. The default for hardware compatibility is VMware Workstation 8. Like I said, VMware Workstation 9 is out. We just don't have the license keys for it yet. Even if you download 9 or get an evaluation copy or something, make sure that you save it as VMware Workstation 8. Otherwise, you won't be able to open it up in class, and that won't be as much fun. So make sure that you keep that. If we did the installer disk right here, it does what's called an easy install, and we don't want to do that. It's just not as realistic. It sort of automates the process. Great for virtualizing out in industry. We're not concentrating on virtualizing. We're concentrating on installing VMware Workstation. Yes, Bill.
As far as the licensing for Workstation 9, do you have the license key for 9 yet?
I do not have the key for VMware Workstation 9 yet. It comes through the public channels first, and then it eventually migrates over to the academic channels. And I keep checking every couple days, and as of last Friday, it was not in the academic channel that we get our licenses through. I mean, we could buy the full copies for everybody. Probably not. We're going to wait for the academic free versions to come out. So as soon as they come out, I'll let you know. But because we're not going to be upgrading the labs, just realize that if you ever create a new virtual machine with VMware Workstation 9, when it does come out, that very first screen, make sure that it's VMware Workstation 8 compatible. Otherwise, you won't be able to run it anywhere else except at home. Unless you just want to watch the videos at home and do everything from home, that's fine. Okay, but anyways, I'll install the operating system later on. We'll take a look at that. The guest operating system doesn't really matter. It doesn't make things work or not work. It just helps us with some defaults for the next couple of screens. So, but it is helpful. So we will try to choose the best we can. We'll choose Linux, and the version is Ubuntu. And there's an Ubuntu and there's an Ubuntu 64-bit. We are choosing a 64-bit because both of our desktop and our server that we'll be installing today are both going to be 64-bit operating systems. So I'll click next. Where you put this is probably the most important decision. Everything else can be changed between memory and hard drive size and even naming it. The location is really, really important, because if you put this on your C drive, you're going to lose it by the end of class when you turn off your computer because of Smart Shield. So you have to make sure that you put this on your portable drive. My drive is going to be the D drive. And then just for ease of backups on my part, I have a virtual machines folder. So all my virtual machines go underneath this one folder. Then I split it up by classes. So in this case, I have Linux 2. Under Linux 2, I already have an Ubuntu desktop and an Ubuntu server. That's okay. I'll make a new folder, and I'll call it Ubuntu desktop, because that's the one we're working with 2. And I click OK. And that didn't save it. Let me do it again. There we go. Sometimes when you create new folders, there's just a little bit of a lag, especially on portable drives, so make sure that it actually says the folder that you created. Your virtual machine, it's really nice to name it the same as your folder. So when you're looking at the virtual machine name in the upper left-hand corner of your virtual machine, you know which folder you're going to work with, because we always work with virtual machines as a complete folder, not as individual files. I click next on here. Number of processors is 1. We could go up to multiple processors, but we don't really need to. So clicking next on here again, and it defaults to 1 gig. We have lots of memory on these computers, so we might just bump this up a little bit. Realize that if you're going to run this on a home computer, that you may not have the tons of memory. Memory is something that's adjustable on virtual machines. Very, very easy to adjust up and down while it's down. So shut down the virtual machine, go to VM settings, and then change the memory. But we'll do the 2 gig for today. I'll show you later on of how to change that. We are going to be using NATing, Network Address Translation. We have a really nice defined network address translated network to work with, so we'll stay within there. And this is just one of those recommended ones based on that we're running Linux. So it's going to, just suggest a type of controller for us. We're going to create a new virtual machine, a new virtual disk. It's create that hard drive of our computer right now. We could use an existing virtual disk, or we could use a physical disk. We're going to make its own new drive. Options of IDE or SCSI. One thing we noted last week is if you use IDE, IDE is not hot swappable. It's plugged in, you can't remove it, you can't add IDE drives. With SCSI you can. That's why with the Novell, while the server's running, we could actually add a SCSI drives to it. It's recommended, we're just going to keep it that way. What's the size of the disk? Again, based on the Ubuntu 64-bit option choice, it recommends a 20 gig drive. That's going to be fine for us. We're not putting much stuff on it, so that's going to be great. This is completely optional of how you choose. It's your preference, whether you want to have your virtual disk as a single file or if you wanted to have it as multiple files. The multiple files is nice because you have a bunch of smaller files, but the other way is you have the single files, you have one large file. It's sometimes easier to manage. It is actually a little bit more efficient with the virtual machine to have a single file because it's not jumping around looking for it. But on a FAT32, you have to use your multiple files because the single file won't fit in that 2 gig limitation. Does anybody have a FAT32 drive that you're still using?
I have one at home.
You have one at home? Yeah, if you're using it for backups and stuff like that, if you have any kind of drive out there that you're still using for backups as a FAT32, use multiple files. The difference is not going to be that big, so that's why it's purely your preference of what you want to do. It doesn't make any difference as far as what we're doing in class. That's the virtual disk file, which is fine. We click next, and now we're finished. I typically like to have the VMware workstation window maximized here. It just gives you more room when I'm actually working with the virtual machine. I showed this in the other class, but let's show it again. You have these extra tabs up here, like this home tab. We really don't need it. I usually don't create new virtual machines or open virtual machines from these big icons, at least me personally. I'm kind of a file open, file save kind of person, and so I'm used to doing this. So you can close that extra tab. It doesn't come back. Well, actually on your machines it will because of Smart Shield, but if you're doing this at home, you're saying, oh, where did that home tab go? I'm used to that look and feel. It's not as obvious as you would think it would be. It's actually under tabs, and then you have to go to your home tab up on top, and that brings the home tab back. So there isn't a way of showing home tab or clicking it or enabling it. When I removed it the first time, I'm looking under view. Where's that home tab? So I'm going under settings, and I just couldn't figure it out. And anyways, found the tabs, go to home tab. Okay, continue with the installation of Ubuntu Desktop. The next thing we want to do is, in fact, choose the CD that we'll be installing it from. And by doing that, we just click on the CD DVD underneath the configuration over here. We just have to click on it once, and it brings up the virtual machine settings. And it automatically brings you to the CD DVD settings for it. It is prompted to connect it power on, which is good, and to use the physical disk. This is where if you had the actual install CD, you'd put in your physical drive and it would boot to it. We're not going to use many of those. It's easier copying files around than copying CDs around. So we're going to use an ISO image. ISO images are identical to CDs. It is an image of the CD, not just the file. So it's not just copying files and zipping them or whatever. It's actually the format of the disk and everything. It's image in the disk, and they can be used as a disk. So I'm going to browse for the file. Somewhere you should have your ISO files, those ISO images that I gave to you. Again, on my data drive, I keep ISO images in its own folder, again, just for ease of backups and knowing where everything is. I could break these down by classes to sort them out a little bit, but these are the only ones that I have right now, so it's not too confusing. I believe I gave you, actually, what version? When you downloaded it, what version did you get? The which one?
That one.
The AMD 64 or the i36? Okay, that's what I put up on the network. If you want to play with the 32-bit one, I have it as well, or you can download it either way, but just let me know. I do have the 32-bit version. Like I said, we'll be using the 64-bit version for class. So Ubuntu 12.04 desktop AMD 64 is where I have mine. It's going to choose that one as my disk drive, and I click OK. And at this point, I can power on the virtual machine. So I built the machine, I gave it a processor, I gave it memory, I gave it a hard drive, I inserted a CD in the disk drive, and now it's booting to that. I really like working with things virtually as full screen, so I'm going to hit Control, Alt, and Enter to bring me into full screen. By default, this little menu bar stays up on top. It's not so bad right now because the screen is small, because I don't have VMware tools and that kind of stuff installed, but it sort of just gets in the way. So I usually unpin it by clicking on the little pin on the left-hand side, so it hides the command bar. It's still there. I just can hover up to the top, and it shows it. But it just sort of gets out of the way. And now I go through the installation of Ubuntu Desktop. It's a pretty easy install. The first one is, it's assuming that you do have a disk which you're booting to it. They actually make a live CD, so I could just click on Try Ubuntu right now, and just like literally, you can make a CD and put it into any computer that you want anywhere, boot to it, and just try it. It doesn't install anything on the drive at all. It doesn't change anything. It's not like, oh my word, it's going to whip up my Windows 7 with all my data and all my family pictures. It doesn't touch it at all. It's kind of nice to play with. It's a nice operating system to have in your toolkit, because it is a full operating system. It has text editors, it has network, web browsers, network configuration, so you can do a lot of stuff and not modify the machine that you're working on. So it's really nice to have that full operating system available to you. We are in fact going to install it because we'll be using it this semester. So I'm going to click Install Ubuntu. And normally we'd click on download updates while installing, but there's a lot of updates, and having 21 people doing downloads for updates at the same time may not be a good idea. The other thing is, I want everybody to have the same version of Ubuntu, not just different service packs or updates or whatever. So in fact, we're not going to be doing any updates on them. We're going to keep them nice and clean for right now. When we do updates, we'll do them all together to make sure they're all exactly the same. It's going to run fine. There isn't anything huge service packs to make anything fix that's broken as far as what we're working on, at least not yet. So it's going to be fine. So don't select this. Go ahead and click Continue. And this computer currently has no detected operating system. It's a brand new disk. What would you like to do? The default is erase the disk and install Ubuntu. So let's click Continue. A lot of these are going to be defaults, but understanding what the screens do is kind of important. The entire disk will be used. If you had multiple disks, you could choose them from the drop-down. Say you had 4 physical disk drives in there, you choose which one you're going to install to. We only have 1, so we're going to do it. So we're going to install now, and we let it do its thing. It defaults to Chicago, at least. I'm not sure if it detects where we're at, but it's always come up with Chicago, which is fine, which is where we are. If you notice, it's actually doing the installer while it's copying files. So in the background, sort of copying files while it's getting information from you. So I think that's pretty cool. But I do want to choose Chicago for our time zone. Keyboard layout. This is really interesting. The second option over here is we have US, and then we have US Cherokee. I never saw that in any other option before. The defaults are fine, so we're just going to click continue. And as you notice, the copying files are still happening in the background. Okay, who are you? Pretty straightforward question. Your name, and we can use your full name. So in fact, I will type in Paul Benfield. Your computer's name is automatically going to be generated using your first name followed by virtual machine. Just to help out in case there's any confusion, I would suggest that after your first name on your computer's name, that you actually put your first initial after that. So Paul B dash virtual machine is what I would put. Sean T, Chris S, whatever. Same for the username. I would just get used to using your first name and last initial for those kinds of things. For what we're doing in the Ubuntu class. And then choosing a password. The password that we're going to be using for class, and again, that way if you ever have a question, what did we choose in class, I can tell you we chose password. P-A-S-S-W-O-R-D, all lowercase. It tells me that's a weak password. Absolutely. Password is not a good password to have. It's probably one of the first ones that people use to try to guess your password. But again, we're not trying to trick anybody or lock anybody out at this point. We're trying to make it so that you can actually log in next week when we have class again, as opposed to, oh, what was that complex password that I made and I put it in my notes and I just can't find it. Require my password to log in. We definitely want to keep that for this class. If you're just using this as a home computer, just something to use casually, logging in automatically is really nice. You just turn on the machine and it brings you right in, and you can go right into your applications and do what you want to do. But for this class, we do want to be logging in each time. We do not need to encrypt our home folder. I click continue. And pretty much the rest are going to be defaults. Reading through the screens, take your time when you're working with your partner to read through these screens. It's kind of like little ads, why are we good, what features do we have, but it gets you thinking as far as what features are available. We're not going to get into everything. We're definitely, in fact, on the desktop, we're not going to hardly get into anything. This is just getting a client to be able to log on to our server those few times that we do need to do it. But, just lets you think, oh, gosh, I can do that in here. Let me try it out and look at it some other time. Jot down even notes on that. Let's wait for this install part. Virus-wise, are we safer on Linux than Windows? Your thoughts? You're safer on Linux than on Windows? Okay, why? Yeah, that's probably the only way that you're safer on it is because there's fewer viruses written for it. If I'm going to write a virus, I want to affect as many people in the world as possible, and the most vulnerable people. And typically, everybody uses Windows, and I'm looking for a vulnerability that I can, affect masses and masses and masses. Ubuntu desktop is really, really nice. Still a really small percentage of users, especially novice users or people just playing with computers. They're usually into computers and a little bit more tech savvy and knowing what to watch for most of the time. I mean, there's still a lot of other people that can, do dumb things as well, but they're very, very careful. Or at least they're much more careful about it. So those two aspects, it's not a big base. People aren't going to write viruses. Are there viruses for Linux? Absolutely. And some of them are even cross-platform. They're very generic. Things that run on, like even Java or anything like that, it's going to be, doesn't matter what you're running on top of. So definitely be careful of those things still. We're not going to play with any antivirus software on the desktop. Again, we're not concentrating on the desktop. So we're going to install it, get you into it, and use it a little bit. Just to get you around it, but we'll be definitely concentrating on the server side of things. But it's nice to at least see it. Marco?
Why Ubuntu?
Why Ubuntu? As opposed to
The other
like Red Hat or Fedora or those other versions or SUSE Linux? There's a big base for Ubuntu. Ubuntu Desktop is probably the most popular desktop Ubuntu operating system on the free side. Red Hat on the commercial side is probably very familiar. And then SUSE is very strong on the desktop and server side as well. In fact, the Linux Plus stuff is a lot based on SUSE Linux. Linux is kind of Linux though.
why don't for Linux 1, why don't they teach that instead of Fedora?
Oh, excellent question. Ubuntu Desktop is very, very graphical, and it's, you don't do a whole lot of command line stuff. Red Hat and Fedora is really still very deep and technical, and that's your only exposure that you're going to get to that. And so you need to have that exposure. It's kind of like, they don't teach it anymore, but they, even up through the Windows days, you had to take a DOS class. Why would I take a DOS class? Well, because there's times that you have to get that level. And if you're only working with a GUI interface, and all of a sudden you run up with a support call that's going to require you to go in and do different command line things, or even working on those systems, they're not going to have all those interfaces. And you're going to say, well, I don't know how to do that. I've never seen that before. Or worse, of seeing the blinking cursor and panicking and like, oh my word, I don't even know how to get out of here. So you really have to feel comfortable with that. When we get into the server side, we're going to do a lot of command line stuff. I'm not making you memorize stuff like in Linux 1. It's just stuff that you got to do. So write it down, keep it in a journal, a notebook, and then when you need to do it again, you just practice with it, so you get familiar with it, but you can always go back to those notes. I am not trying to trick you. It's just the way that you have to do it, though. So yes, the desktop is going to be very graphical. The server is going to be very text-based or command-lined. So having that background with Linux 1 is extremely important for having that, because if you didn't have that, also when trying to do server things, which are more complicated just by the nature of server things, and we don't understand basic commands. Am I going to expect that you remember all those commands from Linux 1? No, because to be completely honest, I don't remember them all. You don't use them all the time. So, I don't remember any of them? Well, okay, there's a couple that you should probably remember. Just like navigating, and almost 2 years for some of you? Okay. A cheat sheet. It's called notes. Yeah, take them, use them, and organize them how it's useful to you. There is no one master. You can, it's like, oh my word, I don't know where to start. go out online and there's all kinds of reference guides, reference sheets, quick guides, you know, one-page PDF things of different commands, syntax. You know, there's a ton of resources. So take advantage of those. Marco.
Isn't there a newer server version of Ubuntu named something else?
No, it is not until next month.
What is
We have a few minutes here, so we'll talk about it. We're on version 12.04. What happened to version 12.03? And where's version 12? What was the last version prior to this? 11.10. And then before that was 11.04. Where do we get these version numbers from? The year and the month. What's the company does it? Canonical? I never can pronounce that correctly. They're the ones who come with Ubuntu, and they have guaranteed absolutely every 6 months they're coming out with a new release of the software. So it comes out in April, which is 04, and it comes out in October, which is 10. And the first number, the version 12, is the year. So I already know that next October there's going to be a new version, and it's going to be called 13.10. And so that's how you come up with version numbers. So that's why I know that 12.04 is the latest version, because 12.10 is not released yet. Now you also have things like LTS behind it. Anybody know what that stands for? Long-term support. What does that mean? For a long term, and I should know this. You have to look. What is it?
5 years.
Is it 5 years? So I know that for this, they'll support this for 5 years. So if I was putting this in a enterprise environment, I'd be choosing the long-term support ones, knowing that once I install the server, I'm good on this for a long time. That's typically the 04s, and I thought it was even like every other year, like 904, then 1104. I'm sorry, 1004, and then 1204. Oh, I didn't look this up because I was.
Next long-term support is 1404. It's coming out in 2017, about 2014.
Right, 2014 for 1404. Right, so it's every 2 years they come out with the long-term support. The 3 releases between that are just normal. So there's updates, there's really cool new features on there. It has all the latest kernels, it has the latest applications that are doing there. They sometimes even change the interface and, you know, all that kind of stuff. So if you're just on it and want to use it, you definitely be upgrading all the individual ones. If you just want to have a web server that you can plunk down and leave it there for the next 2-3 years without having to update every 6 months, because that can be a real pain. You know, major updates, not just the service packs or the fix updates, then you definitely go for that. The 3 in between do not have that long-term support though. So if you decide, you know what, I'm going to go with 12.10, it's not going to have support for the next 5 years or whatever the long-term support is going to give you. Support is really where most Linux places are getting their money. Linux is free. It can be distributed freely, it can be used freely, you can even modify it and resell it. It's when we use it, when the home user uses it, you download it, you use it, you have problems, you go online, tons and tons of really good forums. If I have this in a production environment though, and I need this to be running, I'm going to be purchasing support, and I buy it from Canonical, and that is how they make their money. Same thing with like Fedora or SUSE. It's a little bit different because there's still licensing for user licensing, but the major portion of it is support contracts. So you buy SUSE Linux, and then you buy support from Novell in that case. Other questions? Really good questions.
Does it take like a year to install?
It was downloading some packs, some stuff from the internet, so I think that was slowing it down. When I did it on my own computer without having a room full of people, it took about 20, when I mark it down, I wrote down 20 to 25 minutes. I had completely installed. And that, when I did it, that included updates.
So
How
should
long
we
if
take
you
a
wanted
break?
to, if you wanted to put it on CD, it take just as long,
Yes.
but then you can pop that CD anywhere. Does it need to be a DVD or a CD?
It's 700 meg, so that should fit. There's ways of a CD holds 680 megabytes, but there's ways of squeezing more on it. So if you can get that 700 meg on there, I think server is what though, 725. So that could be a little bit
You
tougher.
could put it on a flash drive too.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Would you do the same, put on a flash drive, same way using?
That you'd have to use an ISO file though. You'd have to make it as an ISO file. We're doing it using the ISO file. We're using the ISO file. So if you use a thumb drive, you'd have to point to the ISO file on the thumb drive. If you use a CD, it's not an ISO file anymore. It's the actual written out on the format of that disk. So you physically put the CD in. It boots the CD, and that's why it's really important the format of the disk. Now you can't just copy files onto a disk and make it bootable. It's like a hard drive. I just can't copy an operating system to a disk, plop it in, and expect it to boot. Certain files have to be located at certain locations on the disk. So when I'm looking for an operating system, I blindly go looking out in a certain sector for some files. I grab whatever's there. If the operating system isn't on that specific spot, it's not going to boot. We have no control over where files are on disks. The operating system takes care of all that. That's why you need special programs to make CDs bootable, or even floppies bootable, or hard drives bootable. You need to go through that process properly. So, okay, I'm going to click Restart Now. You need to restart your computer in order to use the new installation. I click Restart. One thing about Ubuntu, there's no root user. It's a little bit different how they work with users. And then all your commands that you need to be running as root, you use the command sudo. And then you do your root commands after that. And we'll see that as we get into it.
So you can use login to as root and then
You can't.
command away?
You cannot log in as root under Ubuntu.
So you can like just
To root,
you get a higher level.
now you can switch users to a different user, but not to root.
It says please remove installation again.
Oh, I'm not even paying attention. Thank you. I'm looking and talking. Okay, please remove the installation media. To do that, you hit Control-Alt to give your mouse back, and we go up to VM, and we go to Settings. Thank you for pointing that out. I wasn't even paying attention. Once I get on the options screen, I click on the CD/DVD setting, and all I have to do is really uncheck this. I just get in the habit of also switching off of the ISO image. One thing is if the ISO image is still chosen, it locks the ISO image while it's being used. You can't delete it or move it or update it and that kind of stuff. So it sort of frees up that connection to the ISO file. So the two things I did was use the physical drive, and then I say don't connect on power on, because we're not doing anything. If we needed the CD-ROM, we'll come back and connect it. And then I click OK. Then I have to click back in the window and hit enter for it to actually restart. Then we get the beautiful command line little text things popping up. Makes you all feel all warm and fuzzy that something technical is happening, right? It boots extremely fast. I mean, it's just right there. It comes up, hey, that's my user, Paul Benfield. What's my password? It already has it listed for you right there. No, you just have to type it in. It's just password, and I hit enter. And this is your desktop. It's booted up, it's up and running. Let me just give you a 2-minute tutorial on this so you don't get frustrated and get lost on here. There's a lot to explore and play with, and I'd strongly suggest that you do that over the next week, 2, 3 weeks, or whatever, just to play with it and see what it's like. Probably the most important thing is, how do you shut this thing off? How do I get out of here? There's no start button, so you can't do start, shut down, or whatever. You do not unplug the power cord, and you don't go to VM and force the power off or anything like that. It's the upper right hand corner. It's sort of like this gear, but it's actually a power switch. So if you click on the little power switch thing, you have the options then to lock your screen, to log out, so it just logs you out and you log as a different user. Suspend the computer, putting it to sleep essentially, or shutting down. And shutting down is what you want to do. That's about it to shutting down. I'm just realizing it's up there though, and not looking for a start button. You really don't have a start button. In the upper left though, you have a dash home, so like your dashboard. If you click on here, then you kind of have this little interactive desktop thing. To get rid of it, you just click on it again and it goes away. So this makes it come, this makes it go away. It's kind of Windows 7-ish in that I can just start typing a program. So I don't have to like go searching under programs, utilities, you know, applications, whatever. If I want the calculator, I can just start typing calc, and it brings up everything that sort of has cal in it. Not sure how color came up, but we have the calculator and we have LibreOffice calculator. By the way, it's using LibreOffice as its office suite. Is anybody familiar with OpenOffice? LibreOffice is actually the next iteration of it. There was a break when, who bought them? Oracle? No, Oracle bought OpenOffice. Or is it Sun? Yeah, Oracle bought them. And anyways, the people broke off and make LibreOffice. So if you're familiar with it, LibreOffice is just the current. It does read and write Word documents, Excel spreadsheets, PowerPoints, that kind of stuff. Anyway, if you're looking for something else like maybe Paint, I don't have anything for Paint yet. If I wanted something that would work with Paint and add extra applications, then we sort of become like the Android Play, the stores, the iTunes store, whatever. And that's this little, it looks like a gift basket that's like sparkling and has, you know, little things come out of it. This is your online store essentially.
Wow.
And they have a top rated ones like VLC Player or something like that. If I want to find something, I don't know, let's search for Paint. Here's GNOME Paint, Tux Paint, Color Paint, and really all you do is click on it and install. So it's very, again, like Android, iTunes, iStore related. You find what you want and you install it. Being Linux based, the far majority of these are completely free. You just install them and you're done. You do get ratings on them, see, you know, what you like on there, whatever. If I click on something else, like if I click on Home Folder, this is kind of Mac-ish and kind of Windows-ish. These applications are still running, and it indicates that they're still running because they have these little carrots next to them. So you can see what's open and running. So if I had, you know, the writer open, you see a little carrot next to that. So these are the 3 applications that I actually have running. To switch between them, it's just like Windows. Across the bottom, I can, you know, choose what I want to do. You do get different menus. This is kind of Mac-ish in that your title bar up on top becomes your menu for your application. So if I'm running here, I go up to the top. I have a different menu here than I do for LibreOffice. And it's not real consistent, unfortunately, yet. So if I want to actually exit the file browser, I'd have to go to File and then close that, and now the carrot goes away. Just by clicking, oh, let's see, if I click the X on there, for that one it does. If but there is no X on the Ubuntu Software Center. So this one you'd actually have to, if you want to close it, go to File, Close, and then that closes. So again, just a little bit of navigation, just a quick 2-minute tour of that. There's lots of other things to explore. This bar does go longer. You sort of have to scroll up and down to see it. A big area with kind of like the control panel is the system settings. You click on that, and just like the Windows control panel, it has big categories of things to work with. Oops, there we go. Displays, color, and whatever. How do I get LibreOffice open? Exit. Okay. And then they'll bring up other tabs down here as you're working with things. Networking, power. So like I open up power, it actually opens up another tab on there. Again, to exit, I go up to the little power button in the corner, and I can shut down. Are you sure you want to close all the programs? Yes, I am. And it shuts down extremely quickly. The most important step right now is, before we do anything to this virtual machine, is to take a snapshot of it, making sure that we have a base to go back to, and that we do under VM, and then under snapshot, take snapshot. I'm just going to call it base install, and just to help me remind, my password is password. You can put any notes in there that you want, and I take the snapshot. I'm not going to play a whole lot with snapshots right now, describe them, but it does give you a place to go back to, so we can make changes under networking, we can install other applications, we can mess things up completely, and we can go back to that snapshot. And our machine, our complete machine, not just some of the settings, but our data, settings, applications, everything go back to that time. This does not replace backups. Yes, it can help you in case you mess up your virtual machine. You can go back to a snapshot. But if you still damage your drive, or if you lose your drive, or if the files became corrupt, snapshots don't do anything for you. They're just a bunch of files as well. You still have to back up. Quick thing on backup, make sure that the VMware workstation is not running before you back up your directory. Otherwise, there will be a bunch of locked files on there. Questions on the desktop install? No? Okay. I want to take a break, and we'll come back and do the server install.